but please introduce yourself and what's sort of your role at Geopost.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. So my name's Caryn-Ann, and I'm the Associate Director for Sustainability at Geopost. So basically, I work a lot on similar topics to what Sonia was saying about really how we can engage more broadly with our stakeholders to accelerate our performance towards our goals. And I've been working in corporate sustainability now for about 15 years.
Wow.
So I started off, and originally actually I studied politics at university, and I always thought I'd go off and work in sort of the NGO sector, and I had an opportunity to do an internship in what was at the time called CSR, and I thought, well, maybe there's more impact to be had working within the private sector on some of these topics.
I think that's encouraging, because I think that's exactly the role of the CSOs. If you look, I want to do impact, I go to Greenpeace, which is amazing, but there's maybe not a lot of, not everybody can go there, and we need 50,000 new CSOs or ESG experts next January, 8 months from now, or something. I'm not good in math. So I think that's encouraging that you say, all right, I started with NGOs, but I want to do impact within a corporation. Now, tell us a little bit about, let's say, your project. So what are the challenges in your role, and maybe some of the projects you are proud of?
Yeah, of course. So perhaps I'll start by introducing Geopost just a little bit, because I'm not sure that everyone in the room knows who we are.
We have an international audience.
So we are a market leader in parcel delivery and also e-commerce solutions. And we're actually part of the French Post, so La Poste Group. And last year we represented around, I would say, 45% of their revenue. So I think it's maybe a little known fact that La Poste is actually very present internationally. So as Geopost, we are present in around 50 countries, and we operate through a number of local commercial brands. And for those of you that are based in France, you'll probably know us best as DPD or as Chronopost. I think just in terms also of the size of the company at the moment, last year we posted revenue of around just under 16 billion euros, and we delivered around 2 billion parcels in 2023.
Wow,
so that's who we are.
That's a big one, all right.
So obviously,
got our attention.
Yeah, so obviously given the size, we also, and I think it was also, Sonia was saying it, we also have a responsibility in terms of how we can help sort of transform also the parcel delivery sector. And as a business, we have also set ourselves a goal of becoming the international reference in sustainable delivery. And one of the key areas that we focus in on is obviously how we can decarbonize our operations. And around 2 years ago now, we set a net zero target for 2040 that was validated last year by the SBTi. So that's really kind of shifting our focus and really helping us to hammer down on how we can go about decarbonizing. And so to your point about, well, how are we doing that? So I think what's quite interesting is to consider the last mile is probably the most visible part of the iceberg, as it were. It's what everyone sees on the roads is our vans. And we've been working on sort of switching away from diesel vans towards primarily electric in the last mile, I think for over 10 years now. And I think we've made really good progress. Today on fleet, we have around 9,000 low-emission vehicles, and it represents about, today, just under 14% of our overall last-mile fleet. But we need to keep in mind that if we are to meet our net zero target, we need to have reached 100% by 2035, and that's really what we're working on now.
That's your target?
In terms of the fleet. So net zero by 2040, fully alternative fleet in the last mile by 2035 if we're to meet the 2040 goal. And I think it's important to note that obviously for us decarbonization, a big part of it is around electrification, but it's not only about that. I think Ruben also alluded to the fact that it's also about going and continually looking for those operational efficiencies in terms of how we're filling our vehicles, we're planning our routes,
Are you the cargo bike in this slide?
And so we do have a couple of cargo bikes on fleet at the moment. And I think last year we increased it by about a fifth, the number of cargo bikes we have operating in Europe. And it's not only about getting those cargo bikes, it's about how are we going to operate those cargo bikes. So we're also working on building out a series of urban depots, because obviously the closer we are to the city centres, the shorter the final distance, and the more we're actually able to use other alternatives like cargo bikes. So that's also part of the way we're looking to decarbonize the last mile.
So these are kind of little hubs where the cargo bikes go and pick up?
Yeah, well, they can be, well, obviously where some of the vans also come to deliver the parcels, and then they'll go out for delivery from those hubs. Sorry, the depots.
Yeah, and so you have all this vast fleet of, let's say, delivery things and new projects, so to say. So what are some of the challenges also in this business? So, you know, getting new equipment, getting new technology, but what other, you know, hard things are there to track?
I think, I mean, obviously the question that you asked was around last mile, and I think we've almost got a handle on the last mile. There are some challenges, and I'll get to that next, but I think we're also focusing in on how we can also decarbonize more the line haul. And for those of you that might not know what line haul is, it's more the medium haul, longer haul distances that we travel, typically between the hubs and the final depots. And that's typically, we run those movements with trucks. And so I think we've probably all seen e-vans on the road. I'm not sure how many of us have seen e-trucks on the road. And so that's also an essential part of our plan, because 50% of our carbon emissions actually come from those line haul operations. And so we are working now on diversifying that line haul fleet. Obviously, we believe very strongly in electric truck technology as a way for us to do that, but we're also conscious of the fact that, you know, to have those still need to come to scale. So we're also focusing, at least as a transition fuel, on HVO, for example, but also working more widely within the sector, because we can't do it alone, and we need to help create that demand for zero-emission trucks. And we're actually part of a coalition of companies called EV100+, where we're coming together to make our voices louder and sending a clear demand signal to the market, but also to policymakers, that we want to see the supply of those zero-emission trucks ramped up.
What are, I mean, we heard maybe about the Tesla truck and some of the Nikita or so. What are, can you name one or two suppliers who are already on the road?
So,
Volvo, Scania?
Well, yeah, I don't know if for advertising purposes,
no,
but so the manufacturer that's got the most trucks available at the moment is Volvo. And so we've got actually a number of trucks that we're running within our network at the moment. We have around 9 in Switzerland, and we have some trucks in the Netherlands and Czech Republic too. And we're trialing electric truck technologies, I think, in France and the UK at the moment.
And these trucks, are they electric, or is this some kind of a hydrogen electric mix?
So for the moment, we're focusing mostly on electric. Hydrogen, we see a use case for them in certain conditions, but not necessarily across our business in the future. So obviously, but one of the challenges that's common to both sort of the e-vans and also the trucks is the charging. And I think that's really one of the areas that we need to look more, and we are looking more closely at, because we've seen now, at least for the last mile, that we lack space at our depots in terms of being able to install the infrastructure that we need to charge our vans. And in addition to that, those issues are compounded by the fact that we don't necessarily always have the power that we need available on the grid on our sites. So we're working now across the business to try and find the right solutions in terms of smart charging, how we can better do load management on those sites. And more broadly also, when we look at the heavy-duty vehicles, it's how we can also work broadly with coalitions, for example, like the Smart Freight Centre. There's also work being done by Meyere to understand where we can also, which corridors are the most used in Europe, where we would actually want to see and need to see that infrastructure being installed.
Right. So it's a big orchestration effort with, let's say, new technology, even, let's say, maybe not competition, but co-opetition, just forcing the industry to deliver you. I mean, I can just imagine that at night you see all the trucks on the highways just parking. There's not enough parking space for them to sleep, and now where do they want to charge? There's not
and I think I mean, we're not speaking that much about the social dimension of trucking, but that's also really important, is what services are available to truck drivers when they are. And it's also almost thinking about charging as how we can also use some of their rest times, where they would then be able to charge the trucks during rest times, for example. So it's always about bringing the two together at the end of the day.
So maybe some of these innovations, let's say, that you initiated, maybe you can kind of give us a couple of examples. Where can we see something
with pleasure.
new and amazing?
So I think it's also about, like, what is innovation, right? Is it only about new technologies? And I think oftentimes it's about maybe bringing some fresh thinking to the fore that actually creates value. And so for us, obviously, I mentioned the net zero, and that's been something that's been a fundamental also commitment that we've made as a business. And we actually introduced last year a new process called the carbon budget, and it's a tool that we're hoping to use as a way to not only strengthen governance around our decarbonisation work, but also to bring together more and more the financial and the non-financial sort of streams within the business. And the way the carbon budget works is that basically we ask our business units to every year fix and to identify their decarbonisation pathway for the year that's coming, obviously in line with the way that we had also built the roadmap to 2040. And then also to put next to that what investments and what spend will be going into decarbonisation in the following year. And the idea there is obviously also to be able to monitor the progress that we're making, but also to see, where is more value for money coming in. And so I think that's in terms of decarbonization. So I think that's something that's been a really interesting project to have put in place, and it's also something I know that our parent company, La Poste Group, will also be looking to work on. So, so that's, I think, an interesting piece of innovation in terms of fresh thinking to ensure also progress towards our goals. Another innovation I think that's quite interesting is more also focusing on how we serve our customers. So as a transport service provider, we're obviously acutely aware that we are our customers' scope 3. And I think anyone who works in sustainability and GHG emissions accounting has pulled their hair out and trying to get good quality scope 3 data.
Is that like 100 emails coming to your desk like, hey, Caryn-Ann, we need your numbers?
We need so we've we actually developed a carbon calculator. So it was built in-house between the sustainability team, IT, and marketing. And it's since been accredited by an external partner. And the idea there is that we're able to provide our customers with next to real-time visibility on their carbon emissions with us, so for their shipments with us. And I think it's been a really interesting project to work on because, again, in terms of some of the challenges within the sector, it is about data. And so we spoke about scope 3 data, but it's also now the need to have more accurate, reliable data coming through, and ideally from primary sources of data, so not only talking about default or modeling data, etc. And I think that's incredibly important, especially when we look now with new regulations coming in around the CSRD, but also within the transport sector, the European Commission is also working on new reporting requirements through the Counter Emissions EU projects. So it's not only about making sure we have the right data, good quality data, it's also then about how comparable is that data. And also by working on the carbon calculator, it's also making sure that our methodologies that we're using are aligned with the standards in the sector. So the ISO 14083 was published last year, and we've also been involved in some work around identifying the right methodology to calculate GHG emissions for parcel delivery. Again, looking for getting the data more granular and more precise.
So you said already that you're working with your IT people, and do you have somebody in the team reading all the law, and how do you work on applying all these different policies from Europe? It's a complicated sector.
Yes, so no, we work very closely. We have a very small team based in Brussels that obviously we work closely with, and we were also involved in some work around the new HDV CO2 emission standard directive.
What's HDV?
So, sorry, heavy duty vehicles.
Okay,
sorry, buses and trucks. So we do have teams that are following this closely. Obviously, the CSRD is also going to be a big game changer for us, but for all businesses in terms of making sure we're ready to comply with that new piece of law. So it's about obviously understanding what the policy environment is, because it's also an enabler for us to be able to move forward. And it's, we talk about collaboration and working in partnership, and it's really across all sectors. It's not.
That is almost a lead into, let's say, the role of the CSO. If we zoom out a little bit, how would you describe, let's say, where you're going in the future? So you're, let's say, you already said you're orchestrating with other people, but what is maybe some of the qualities or some of the challenges ahead? How do you describe the future of your role or
and I
similar?
think it's a really good, and I think we speak a lot about the idea about engagement, and I think that is really, really important. And I think up until now, businesses have set sustainability strategies, and oftentimes the responsibility for the delivery of those strategies lies with the sustainability team. But ultimately, it's a company-wide project, right? And so I think now for a CSO, it's about how do you onboard and help everyone feel accountable for a company's sustainability goals and journey. And I think that's sort of the new frontier. It's about really creating that culture shift where everybody has some form of ownership for sustainability.
I think that's really important because, as we know, we have data, but if you don't touch people,
No, and I think it's about touching people's hearts and minds, and I think giving them the sense of purpose, as it were, and we don't necessarily need to be sitting in a sustainability team to be contributing in a way to sustainability.
Right.
I think that's.
And is that like training things, or
I think it's
a
training,
video or an app,
it's
or
awareness raising, it's walking the talk.
Right.
It's about really creating that culture.
Because that could be a long way from wherever headquarter in the 50s level, and then somebody with a cargo bike down here. So, can you describe some of the ways how you try to create this culture?
Yeah. So, it's about I think also what's interesting about Geopost is that we are an international business, but we're inherently a very local business. So I think, we're not an integrator for those that might be more familiar with the sector. And so we also build a lot on what's done locally within the business, obviously giving the overall direction, and ready to use plug-and-play tools and things like that, but a lot of what we do also happens locally in the businesses, in the business units. So there's no one-size-fits-all. It's about adapting and making sure that what we're doing is relevant locally in terms of that awareness raising and the culture shift.
Right. I think there's, we have a couple of more minutes, so we touched upon, let's say, some technology or innovation in the last mile, and I saw, you have this Estonian company with delivering pizza, I don't know, Star something, now we see all these robots building Teslas, and we have a shortage on labor. I guess it's similar in your profession. Everybody.
So I think at the moment. So I think in the moment, obviously there is some labor issues and for drivers and things like that within the sector, which is also why the work that we do as a business to be attractive also as an employer is really important. So sustainability is not only about decarbonization, it's also how you make yourself attractive to talent and you're able to retain that talent. But on the autonomous robots, I think that's also just more around innovation at the moment, seeing how, if we are going to get to net zero, what are some of the other ways that we can also drive towards that? So we have a robot operating in Estonia. We also had a trial last year in the UK in Milton Keynes, and that was highly successful. I think there were maybe I think last year they did around 2,500 delivery routes with the robot, and they're looking to expand that. So it's.
But is that a gimmick, or is it something?
No, I think it's really about testing to see what could potentially work for us in the future, and it's about, it's also about convenience, reliability, and things like that too. So.
Speaking of convenience, one of the last miles, and probably the other. Well, you have the cargo bike, but we see everybody delivering food. It's like not very French, I think. Is that something? Right now there's other companies doing that, but is that something could be part of your portfolio?
So we are
owning the street, basically.
I know that we are also expanding. So obviously we have our very traditional parcel delivery business, but we're also expanding into new sectors around food and healthcare, for example. So it is part of the way that we see also how we can operate in this space.
And obviously on a personal, non-corporate road, you're speaking for yourself. What do you think about a sailboat?
I think it's a really cool idea, and again, I think it's a really nice way, I think, to also kind of connect the story, perhaps, of a brand like a champagne brand or something like that. And I think, at least for our industry, I think it would depend on the use case, really, to see how we would be able to make something like that happen. But I think it's an interesting, fun way of moving goods around.
All right, so we got to be open to new innovation and new ideas. How do you stay informed? Let's say as a CSO, you look at, we talked about policy, but how is this role shifting in the future? How do you, what are you looking forward to in the next couple of years in this area, leadership? And we know, and maybe the last add-on to this question, how do we get 50,000 new young Caryn-Anns joining this? What would you say to young people to go into corporates, to be from your NGO role to kind of say, okay, now let's be an activist within the corporate? So that's a long
question and lots in there. So I think, I still don't think that this CSO's job is done, as it were. I think we still have work to do to move towards really fully embedding sustainability within all the processes of the business. And I think, obviously, legislation helps get us there. But again, it's about how do you convince people that it is the right thing to do and that we're not just ticking a compliance box, that it really does bring value to the business. And I think we can see that more and more. And as Geopost, we firmly believe that sustainability is something that differentiates us on the market. I think in terms of how do we attract, and I know there is obviously the skills shortage within the sustainability function. And I think it's, some of the qualities I think that are really important are where you're able to, when you're convinced about something and you're able to influence through the convictions that you have, I think that can bring you very far within the sustainability function. And obviously being able to work really transversely and cross-functionally across the business, because we can't do it alone.
Yeah.
And that statement is true for within a business, but also how you are going to move your strategies forward by working with others outside of the business. So yeah, you need to be able to work cross-functionally with very different people, very different organizations and structures. So.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anne, for your time, Caryn-Ann, and thank you all. Let's please give a little bit of applause, and thank you to Caryn-Ann.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.